Ivan, thanks for joining us. And the Belgrade International Theatre Festival is something that is well established. Tell me a little bit about it and how you came to be the director of it.
First of all, Simon, thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about BITEF Festival, which will start at the end of September. It is always in the month of September. And it's, as you said, well-established old institution, so to say. This will be its 56th edition. So it was founded at the end of 60s in a period that one Yugoslav sociologist called the authoritarian modernism, because Yugoslavia was not a democratic country in the sense that Western countries are, but still Tito's regime launched at the end of 60s this very radical switch in many domains of life, including culture, social politics, etc., towards modernistic tendencies. And that was the moment when many international festivals were launched in Belgrade and other parts of former Yugoslavia. So it's a kind of very, how to say, special project because it was a kind of cultural and aesthetical emancipation, which didn't come as a result of some democratic, authentic procedure, but it was imposed as a political decision. Anyhow, in these times, in 60s and later in 70s as well, it was one of the unique places, one of unique meeting points where artists from East and West could meet. Just to give you an example, we believe in the legend that Jerzy Grotowski met Living Theatre and their leaders Judith Malina and Julian Beck in Belgrade. And afterwards, we know what happened. They were invited. He was invited, Grotowski, to the States, etc. So it's a very particular context in which the festival was founded, and its main legacies are promotion of cultural differences, making bridges between different performing cultures, and on one hand, and on the other hand, which is maybe its main goal, promoting new theater tendencies. That was the subtitle of the festival when it was founded. But, you know, this notion of newness, as we know, it's a modernistic notion, and it fitted with these times. But nowadays, I have impression that we have to rethink the notion of newness, as a matter of fact, because we are living in postmodern times. So we are not living in these times of modernism anymore. And what is really very interesting is that I'm only the third artistic director in the history of the festival that is almost 60 years long, because it was founded by Mira Trajlovic, who was a Serbian theater director, in collaboration. Her first collaborator was a famous dramaturg, Jovan Chirilov, who succeeded her and stayed at the position of the artistic director until he died, which was some 5 or 6 years ago. So he was in his late 80s, or early 80s, sorry, when he died. So I'm only the third artistic director and the first one who is not the founder of the festival, which is as you can imagine, a pretty big task and obligation, yeah, how to continue the tradition, and on the other hand, how to adapt it to new both cultural and political circumstances and artistic circumstances.
That gives you the chance to either stick with the tradition or change it into something completely different. I know from my own experience of performing in Belgrade a few years ago that there's an extraordinary taste in the city for really quite radical theatre and quite radical poetry and music. Are you able to tap into that on a regular basis?
Yeah, that's right. This tradition is really present in Belgrade, and it's a legacy of BITEF Festival when we are speaking about performing arts. I don't think that the same legacy exists in some other artistic fields. I mean, I decided that we should continue this main line of promoting radical aesthetics, so to say, if not new, because as I said, nowadays it's pretty tricky to speak about newness in the same way as we did in 60s. And as I'm a scholar, I'm a theater scholar, I'm a professor at the university, I think that this could be recognized in my curatorial work as well, because each year I have two major lines kind of cross, so to say. One is the aesthetic line, the aesthetic frame of the edition, and the other one is thematic focus or thematic line. So by presenting these different aesthetic artistic lines, my intention is to lecture about different artistic practices and artistic forms that are still, if not new, as I said, still kind of provocative, different, radical to the mainstream theater. So for example, this year, this artistic focus will be on device theater. Then last year it was on digital performing bodies. Years before, it was about durational performances, immersive theater, and so on and so on. So each year we have this kind of artistic frame and a certain topic, because the aim of BITEF Festival is not only this artistic emancipation, so to say, but a social and political one. I mean, it is a leftist festival, and it is founded as such, and it still is. So this year, the title of the festival is our logo, not logo, slogan, sorry, is a verse from one proletarian song from Yugoslav times, and this verse is we, the heroes of our own labor. We, the heroes of our own labor, and the focus is put on the issues of work in the time of crisis, in the time of pandemia, in the time of war, because of course the most serious consequences of both pandemia and war are death, illnesses, and so on. But one should not forget that people are losing jobs as well. So this is one of the social and economical circumstances in which we live, are forced to change their job, to do different jobs in the same time, or to go to economical migration. So these social and economical issues are the thematic focus of this year's BITEF.
I wondered how you were going to reflect the fact that we're living in a very difficult political climate now, and certainly in your area in the Balkans, that's a highly controversial time of war. and with war in Ukraine now becoming entrenched, it seems, which is really absolutely tragic. I'm wondering how theatre makers are beginning to reflect that and whether you've noticed that in what you've programmed.
Speaking about war in Ukraine, the program and these focuses, both artistic and thematic focuses, were already made when the war started. So it was not possible for us to change this focus, but we will give our best to launch, of course, the issue of the war, to support those who are suffering, and those are, first of all, citizens of Ukraine. But one should not forget that victims are also Russian intellectuals who are dissidents, who are not supporting Putin's politics. So our plan is to have some of Russian theatre makers who were obliged to leave the country because of the war and because of the fact that they are not supporting Putin's politics, to open the festival. So to make a symbolic gesture of supporting those who are against the war, and to make a very firm and explicit statement against the invasion, aggression that Russia made against Ukraine.
Now, you said that you're very much a theatre scholar as well as a theatre practitioner. And I just wondered, what are the trends that you're seeing in theatre? I mean, we know the digital side. We know that what I'd describe as the equivalent of artistic installations is hitting theatre. And I'm wondering whether you're seeing in any particular directions that you've seen young theatre makers going in.
One thing that I recognize in these few last years, which I find really interesting, important, and if you want new, is so-called ecological theatre. For example, our main issue theme last year was this ecological crisis that we are living in. I mean, the whole world is living in. And each edition of festival starts with the day of prologue. So it's before the grand opening. So to say, we have this day of prologue, which is a kind of bridge, a connection between the actual edition of the festival and the previous edition of the festival. And this year, in the day of prologue, we will present a performance from Schaubühne Berlin. It's a wonderful play written by young British author Chris Bush and directed by also a British director, Katie Mitchell. The title is Not the End of the World, but not is, you know, like you can read it either not or the end of the world. And what I find interesting in this recent work of Katie Mitchell and some other authors as well is that they are not only dealing with ecological issues, but they are also trying to introduce ecologically sustainable means of production. So, as you know, in the recent work of Katie Mitchell, you have these bicycles on the stage, which are producing during the performance electricity that will be used in the performance. In this particular piece that we are going to show at BITEF, all the set was made out of recyclable materials. Costumes and props are already used costumes and props from all the Schaubühne's performances and productions. And I think this is really a statement. One can hear comments like, oh, I mean, you know, in theater business, we are not polluting our environment. I mean, the percentage of pollution we are making in theater is really nothing. It's not so important. I mean, this is hypocrisy. We should resolve the ecological issues on other levels. But I personally, I appreciate very much this approach of Katie Mitchell and some other artists that are doing it this way, because I think it's very honest, it's very well thought. And this particular play, Not the End of the World, is dealing exactly with the hypocrisy about ecological issues. So the hypocritical element of ecological issues is one of the main topics of the show. So, for example, this is something new, so to say, and something that could be seen as a tendency that I recognized recently.
And finally, Ivan, I wanted to just mention the issue of language, because, of course, theatre festivals have a problem, international theatre festivals have a problem that music festivals don't have, and that is the issue of language. But I see that you've got many languages in your festival. There's some Spanish, there's some French, there's some English, and of course, all the languages of the area in which you live. Your city has always seemed to be a very open city to different languages, but I just wondered whether sometimes it is a problem and whether you sometimes have to resort to either what opera does in surtitles, or whether you have to have explanations beforehand.
No, we don't have explanations beforehand, but we have subtitles for each production in Serbian and in English. So it's open for foreign audience as well. Each production is subtitled in both languages. And you're right, there are some performances at the festival this year, for example, in which not only one language is spoken, but multiple languages. One of the shows which I like very much is Gardien Party. It's not Garden Party, it's not Guardian Party, it's Gardien Party, because it's a French production about museum guards that are coming from all around the world, and these are real people. It's a documentary theater, so to say, so they're speaking their own languages. And we are, as I said, subtitling it in. I think that our audience have already this experience since long ago, so I didn't realize this as a very big problem. On the other hand, as a curator of the festival, when choosing performances, it's always a challenge to have a very verbal show, you know, which is pretty static, not visually attractive, and very much into language. So it's always a challenge. But for example, this show by Katie Mitchell, it's very verbal. It's visually well done, but it's static. There is no lot of stage movement. So I'm wondering how the audience would react, but the text itself is really very good. So when the text is so good, I don't have any doubts. They have to concentrate. We all have to concentrate a little bit more, and I'm sure it will function.
Ivan, thank you very much, and I hope the festival goes well.
Thank you very much, Simon, for asking these questions and for having me in this interview.